Well, hi everybody, and welcome to another encouragement from the Psalms. Today we're in Psalm 77. Psalm 77, and it's entitled To the Choirmaster According to Jeduthun, a psalm of Asaph. So our mate Asaph, who wrote many of the psalms, is at it again. And this is, I have to say, an absolute blinder of a psalm. So do please take time to get stuck into it. But it begins, I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. So, just from those verses alone, we can see that this is not a psalm of orientation. Life is not great here. I don't think it's a psalm of reorientation, looking back and going, wasn't life difficult, but now it's amazing. I think it's very definitely a psalm of disorientation. So if you're a person who's struggling with life at the minute, finding things difficult, maybe finding it difficult to sleep at night, or whatever, then this, I think, is a psalm for you. And it begins, as we saw there, with the psalmist crying out to God, calling aloud to God, in the hope that God would hear him. And it says, in the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. And I love what, I think it might have been Spurgeon said. He said, the day of trouble must be a day of prayer. And that's the encouragement of the whole Psalms, to take your pain, to take your problems, to take your joys, to take your heartaches, to take all the sort of breadth of human emotion into conversation with God. But we never need to pray more than when we're in the day of trouble. So in the day of trouble, make it a day of prayer, and God will be there. Even if he feels like he's not there, he will be there. It says, in the day of trouble, I seek the Lord. So in that day, prayer must be urgent. You need to seek him. It says, in the night, my hand is stretched out. Okay, so it needs to be active. Okay, it's not just glumly lying around the house. It's seeking after God in a really intentional way, stretching out your hand. And it says without wearying. So it needs to be persistent. So urgent, active, and persistent. The day of trouble needs to be the day of prayer. And then it says, my soul refuses to be comforted. My soul refuses to be comforted. And I was thinking about that, what is that about? Well, so many times the comfort that is offered to us is actually too superficial to be of any use. So I thought this was great. I don't know exactly where I read this, but it said, somebody might say to a person who's in despair, go to a movie, have some fun, or something that takes despair lightly. But we need something more than the superficial. But actually, I think this guy is already seeking the Lord, stretching out his hands and persistently without wearying, and still his soul refuses to be comforted. And we could think back to the story in Genesis, and you remember that story of Joseph has been lost, and the sons have come to Jacob with this sort of story about him being killed by a wild animal. And it tells us in Genesis 37 verse 35, it says, all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. And the grief was just too great to be comforted by anyone. And I think that's the situation here. His soul is so in despair and so in mourning that it kind of refuses to be comforted. And it says, when I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. You hold my eyelids open. So you can picture this nighttime. He's so tired, but yet his grief kind of means that he can't sleep. You hold my eyelids open. He says, I am so troubled that I cannot speak. So his sorrow is just increasing, because remember, he was able to cry aloud in verse 1, but here in verse 4, he can't actually utter a noise. And then he considers the days of old, the years long ago. He's thinking about times when God really came through with answers, and that only increases his pain because God seemingly isn't answering now. He said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. So he's thinking back to his own experiences of God, not just thinking back to kind of the opening of the Red Sea or the Ulster revival or something. He's thinking about stuff that God has actually done in his life. But again, he's struggling. And it says, I love this. It says in verse 6 at the end there, then my spirit made a diligent search. I love this. He kind of cross-examines his unbelief. We've talked about this a few times, haven't we? Speaking to our own souls. He cross-examines his own unbelief. And it says, my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favourable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? And then there's that word, Selah. Pause and reflect. Pause and reflect. You know, if you're in that moment where you're thinking, I can't be comforted, God's not here, he's not active, he's not moving in this situation, cross-examine your soul. Do you really believe God's changed his nature? Do you really believe that he's completely stopped being favourable? Do you really believe that his love has forever ceased? Do you really believe that? And then verse 10, then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. So he says, okay, in answer to this cross-examination, I'm going to appeal to this piece of evidence. Look at all the faithfulness of God in the past. And then he does two steps which I think are so important. Remember the deeds of the Lord and meditate on his mighty deeds. That's what he does. He remembers and he meditates. Someone has written, memory is the handmaid of faith. I just love that. Memory is the handmaid of faith. We need to be people that do this. I was thinking of that picture of Joseph in Egypt. Do you remember what happened in Egypt? Pharaoh had the dream, and there were the 7 fat cows representing 7 years of plenty, and the 7 thin cows representing 7 years of famine. And the thin cows ate up the fat cows in this dream. And Joseph came and he was able to explain that dream. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine. And that's what your dream means. So you better store up some grain in the 7 years of plenty so you can deal with the 7 years of famine. And so it's like this, you know, Joseph, when the 7 years of famine hits, he's able to go, hold on guys, don't worry. And he opens up these barns of abundance. And that's what we need to do, folks. The years of famine will come. The day of trouble will come. But here's the question. Will we be ready and fit and able and prepared enough to open up the treasuries of God's faithfulness in the past? That's what David does, that's what Asaph does here. He says, I will, he first of all, verse 6, his spirit makes a diligent search, and he presents all the evidence, of how down and out he is. And then he says, and then I will appeal, verse 10, to the years of the right hand of the high. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. I will meditate on your mighty deeds. And then he just opens up the treasuries and he goes straight back to God's most almighty deliverance, to the crossing of the Red Sea. When the waters saw you, God, they were afraid. The deep trembled, the clouds poured out water. He goes to all this stuff and he remembers. Folks, can I encourage you? If you're in the day of trouble, make it a day of prayer. Seek him urgently. You seek him actively. Stretch out your hands. Seek him persistently. Don't weary. Then cross-examine your soul and ask the question, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that the God who sent his son to die on the cross for you, do you really believe that he shut up heaven and he's not going to be with you in this moment? Then appeal to all his goodness. Open up the treasuries of the past and enjoy them, even though you're in a period of famine, knowing that he will again be faithful to you. I hope that's of some blessing and benefit. I love Psalm 77, so get stuck into it for yourself. God bless you. Have a great day and speak to you soon. Bye bye.